Hello and welcome to my channel if this is the first video of mine that you are watching, but if it is not, welcome back. Today I have another little impromptu video because tomorrow is my birthday and hopefully I'll be able to post this video on my actual birthday. But in anticipation of birthday celebrations, I may have went a little bit wild on Book Outlet and bought a lot of really awesome books that I am excited to share today. But before I get into the actual book haul, I do have a mocktail that I am going to be pairing with today's video. Unfortunately, I am still battling this cold that morphed into an infection, so there is no alcohol in this drink here, but I've made a autumnal slash festive mocktail, which is a 1-to-1 ratio of cranberry juice and ginger ale with a bit of clementine juice squeezed in, a slice of clementine, some frozen cranberries, and a sprig of rosemary. That smells really, really festive and delicious. So before I dive into the books, cheers. I mean, you can't go wrong, in my personal opinion, with that flavor combination. This is delicious. If you wanted to make it a cocktail, you could add in some Prosecco, or a splash of white rum would also be very delicious, or spiced rum. But even as a mocktail, this is absolutely delicious and something that I will be making several more times over the coming weeks. But let's get into the books. I did buy a few gifts within this book haul. So those I have tucked off to the side because I don't want to spoil it for anyone in my personal life who might be watching this video. But I did manage to buy about a dozen books for myself, and 2 of the books are actually ones that I've already read. So I'll begin with those, which are Godkiller and Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner, and these are the first 2 books in the Fallen Gods trilogy, and I really, really enjoyed this series. I believe Fallen Gods was Kaner's debut. I believe it was her debut. At the very least, it was the first book by her that I read. And I did find the introduction to this world read very much like a debut. If I recall correctly, the world building wasn't seamless. It felt like it occurred in large info dumps, and it felt as if the characters weren't fully fleshed out. Some of their actions and motivations didn't feel as if there were enough breadcrumbs to lead me to believe those events when it actually took place. But one thing that I absolutely loved about the characters in this first book is we are following a young female protagonist. And she, I found, was actually depicted like a young teenager, a tween. I think she's 12 or so. So yes, I have read both Godkiller and Sunbringer. I borrowed them from my library, but I knew that I wanted copies of them on my shelf because once the world got going, I found this universe that Kaner created in which gods exist and there is a battle between the old gods and the new gods, and the connection that exists between the gods and the people who pray to them, who believe in those gods, is intrinsical to the gods' survival. I found that world to be incredibly, incredibly captivating and interesting, and I'm excited to see how Kaner wraps things up in the 3rd installment of this trilogy. Continuing on with the other fantasy books that I bought, which are the majority of this haul, I picked up the 3rd book in the Warrior Bards trilogy, which is A Song of Flight by Juliet Marillier. I own the first 2 books in this trilogy, and I have not read them. However, I saw A Song of Flight on clearance on Book Outlet. I think it was $5 or so. And I absolutely had to pick it up just to complete the trilogy. And I do have a feeling that I'm really going to enjoy this trilogy when I get around to it. The first book is on my 24 for 2024 TBR, so hopefully that'll be within the next 8 weeks or so. But yes, I picked up the third book in a series I have not begun because I am who I am, and it was a great steal of a deal. And I haven't even read the back of this book just because I don't want to spoil it for myself. But a book that I did read the back cover of before I purchased it is Fate of the Fallen by Kade. And this was actually the last book that I added to this haul, and it was one that I was going back and forth on whether I wanted to pick it up. So I went on to Goodreads and I read some reviews, and it was primarily, I think, like a 3-star read. And surprisingly enough, it was a review that rated Fate of the Fallen 2 3/4 stars that convinced me in the end to buy it, even though it was not a favorable review by any means. But I found it on my phone here, and the reviewer said that this is pitched as what if Frodo died and Sam had to complete his task. And they said that that isn't really conveyed throughout this book, so not to expect that. And then went on to describe Fate of the Fallen as a single-player D&D campaign in which the player is our main character and every other character he encounters are NPCs. And I'm really intrigued. I want to read this book now and find my own thoughts and feelings and review it for myself. But yes, on the front here it says, for men to rise, heroes must fall. And we are following, our main character is the best friend to the savior of the world. His best friend has been prophesized to be the savior of the world, and then he dies. So his best friend, even though Aeslo wants to just live in the woods and tend to his trees, decides that someone needs to step into his best friend's place after he dies, and decides that he's gonna give it a go and he's gonna try and save the world as just an ordinary man. The inside cover here also says, not all stories have happy endings. So I'm intrigued to see how I get on with this book. I don't have really high hopes or expectations, but I have found over the last year or two, when I go into a book with low to middling expectations, I'm always pleasantly surprised. So I'm hoping that that will be the case for Fate of the Fallen too. The next book that I have here in front of me is A Fragile Enchantment by Allison Saft. And I first saw this book on a Frolic Through Fiction's YouTube channel before she stopped filming YouTube videos. And I remember really wanting to pick it up, and that was at least a year ago now. It is a Regency romance with fantasy themes and tropes woven throughout. Our main character does have magic, and she is given the opportunity to design a wardrobe for the royal wedding in a neighboring kingdom. When she arrives there, she starts getting along with the groom, who is prickly, abrasive, and begrudgingly being dragged to the altar as a political pawn. An unlikely friendship blossoms into something more, until an anonymous gossip columnist starts buzzing about their chemistry, promising to leave them alone only if Neve helps to uncover the royal family's secrets. The rot at the heart of Avaland runs deep, but exposing it could risk a future she never let herself dream of, and a love she never thought possible. So we have enemies to lovers, we have a Regency England setting, and we have magic, and those are three things that I absolutely adore. As I have already talked about, I have discovered Olivia Atwater for the first time this year, and she writes alternative Regency England in which magic and the Fae exist. So I'm really excited to dive into this one, A Fragile Enchantment, and to see how Allison Saft brings to life this alternative Regency-esque period. I still have 9 books in front of me, so I'm going to start going through these a little bit more rapid fire, or at the very least I'm going to try. But the next book that I picked up is Pandora by Susan Stokes-Chapman. And as you might imagine, this is a book about Pandora's box. It takes place in London during 1799, and our main protagonist is Dora Blake, who is an aspiring jewelry artist. She lives with her uncle above her late parents' once famed shop of antiquities, and a mysterious Greek vase is delivered. After that, her uncle begins to act suspiciously, and Dora is set on finding out more. So this is a Greek myth retelling with mystery and romance woven throughout, and it also features, obviously, a shift from ancient Greece into London of 1799. So I'm really excited to see how that historical shift affects the retelling aspect of this novel, as well as finding out a little bit more about the romance that is promised. And I do love a historical England mystery setting. I find that to be really captivating, intriguing, and compelling. So I think that I'm going to get on very well with Pandora. It says here that it was an instant #1 bestseller in the United Kingdom. So hopefully I really enjoy this book here as well. Then, in a very similar vein, I picked up another book set in historical London, which promises mystery as well as romance, and that is A Dreadful Splendor by B.R. Myers. And it says here on the back that in this ghoulishly fun gothic murder mystery brimming with romance, betrayals, and chills, a fake spiritualist is summoned to hold a seance for a bride who died on the eve of her wedding. But as nefarious secrets are revealed, the line between hoax and haunting blurs. And after I bought this book and it arrived and I was going through everything, I found out that Myers is a fellow maritimer here in Canada. She is from Nova Scotia and lives in Halifax. And this is her first adult novel, although she has written 9 young adult novels. I love reading Canadian literature, as you might have heard me go on and on in previous videos. And it was such a delightful little surprise to find out that this historical murder mystery with romance set in Victorian London was written by a fellow maritimer. So I am prioritizing my 24 for 2024 TBR at the moment, but I really want to dive into this book sooner rather than later. Then the last fiction books that I picked up are actually all 3 books in a trilogy. This is the Stud Club trilogy by Tessa Dare, and these are the only books by Tessa Dare that I have not read. If you've heard me talk about historical romance at all, you would know that Tessa Dare is my favorite historical romance author, and I have made my way through her entire bibliography except for her first series, which is the Stud Club trilogy. And I feel a little bit silly even just saying that name, but that's part of the fun. But yes, the 3 books here are One Dance with a Duke, Twice Tempted by a Rogue, and 3 Nights with a Scoundrel. So these are historical romance books, as I have said, and it follows the Stud Club, which is a very exclusive elite group in London that has limited membership. So it says the delightful trilogy has secrets and scandals to tempt the irresistible rogues of the Stud Club to gamble everything for love. And yeah, I don't think I have anything more to say about these books, except that I'm really excited to read them. I have heard that this should not be compared to Tessa Dare's later books because she very much improved her writing and her usage of tropes and her character development as she grew as an author. So these are a little bit more dated than some of her more recent books. That said, I'm still excited to dive into them. And one thing that I absolutely love Tessa Dare's books for is the banter and chemistry that she is able to create between the main couple, the main love interest in her books. So I'm hoping that all 3 of the Stud Club books will deliver on that as well. Then I did pick up 4 nonfiction books, and the first one is The Power of Geography, 10 Maps That Reveal the Future of Our World by Tim Marshall. I very recently read Prisoners of Geography, 10 Maps That Explain Everything About the World, which was published about 10 years ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. So much so that I almost immediately went out and bought another book in this series, of which this is the 4th book in the series, I believe, so I'm kind of skipping ahead. But this one came out in 2021, so it's a little bit more recent, and I'm really interested to see Marshall's take on world events of the more present day and just learn a little bit more about his interpretation of events. One thing that I really loved about Prisoners of Geography is Marshall's conversational tone in writing his nonfiction. It felt very much like a conversation between author and reader, and there was a dry wit woven throughout Prisoners of Geography that I'm hoping is also present in The Power of Geography. So I probably won't pick this book up before the end of the year, but early 2025, I am looking forward to diving into this book here. The next nonfiction book that I picked up is Steering the Craft, a 21st Century Guide to Sailing the Sea of Story by Ursula K. Le Guin. Obviously, Ursula K. Le Guin is an incredibly well-respected author within fiction and sci-fi, and understandably so. I have only read, I think, 3 books by her, maybe 4, but 3 for absolutely certain. And I absolutely get the hype around her writing. I really enjoyed the characters she built, the worlds that she evoked, and the lessons that were imparted through these very different worlds that she created. So I've had this book on my radar for the last little while, and when I was putting together all of these books to purchase, I had a free book coupon, and I threw this little book into my cart because of that. It is only 130 pages or so, but I'm really excited to dive into it, to mark it up, and hopefully take away a few things that I can inject into my own writing. Then the penultimate book that I picked up is actually a book of poems, and that is Brute by Emily Skaja. I believe that is how you pronounce their last name. This was, I'm not going to lie, partially a cover buy. This cover 100% drew me in and captured my attention so quickly when I first saw it. I just find that to be absolutely mesmerizing. There is something about the hand so daintily placed on the tongue of the wolf with its teeth bared. It's beautiful. And it wraps around, the back is predominantly all black, but it is the wolf's back. The Goodreads description for Brute says that it is a fiery, hypnotic book that confronts the dark questions and menacing silences around gender, sexuality, and violence. Brute arises, brave and furious, from the dissolution dissolution of a relationship, showing how such endings necessitate self-discovery and reinvention. The speaker of these poems is a sorceress, a bride, a warrior, a lover, both object and agent, ricocheting among ways of knowing and being known. Each incarnation squares itself up against ideas of feminine virtue and sin, strength and vulnerability, love and rage, as it closes in on a hard-won freedom. So I remember I went to Goodreads, I read the summary after I was drawn in by the cover and just thought, yes, this is a collection of poems that I absolutely want to get cozy one evening and just make my way very slowly through this book and absorb each line. So yes, this was the second to last book that I picked up. Then the final book that I picked up is actually a cookbook, and that is Cooking for Wizards, Warriors, and Dragons, 125 unofficial recipes inspired by The Witcher, Game of Thrones, The Broken Earth, and many other fantasy favorites by Thea James. I believe Thea James writes all of the connections between the recipes and the books that inspired them, while the actual recipes themselves are created by Isabel Mignoni. I believe that's how you say their last name. And it also has an introduction or a foreword by Kate Elliott. I have flipped through this book and I love the design and the way it has been put together. It feels very reminiscent of medieval manuscripts and illuminated manuscripts, I would say. I also love the way that they have grouped together recipes, because obviously you have breakfasts and second breakfasts or brunch, as well as soups and stews, suppers, desserts, but then at the very end there's a feasts section which shows you or gives you recipes for how to put together an actual menu for an event or for a supper for your friends, which I really, really like. But yes, we have recipes inspired by Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, a stew here inspired by Robin Hobb's The Farsi trilogy, and there are no photos throughout this book to show you what something should look like, but there are really pretty illustrations throughout. And I don't know how this book danced the line very finely between intellectual property rights, but there are little scenes that feel as if they've been pulled out of the books and the series that inspired the recipe. So this recipe here is inspired by N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy, and this looks very much like it could be depicting a scene from one of those novels. And it even says here, as Nasoon knows, the secret to this dish is the memory of family and warmth that accompanies it. Share with loved ones. And there are little asides like that throughout this cookbook, including this one here, which is a recipe inspired by the A Song of Ice and Fire series. And down here it says, "This delicious ham tastes of victory and won't turn to ashes in your mouth." Truly. But yeah, I just am absolutely delighted and so happy that I picked up this cookbook. I'm excited to try a few recipes from it. Here we have crab legs, which is inspired by Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive series. Even Dalinar has to admit that king crab legs are a worthwhile indulgence. So yes, while this is a cookbook, it is such an entertaining cookbook and contains little bits and pieces from some of my favorite fantasy books, as well as I did see a few recipes in there that were inspired by series and books I haven't read yet, which is also just as exciting. So very happy that I picked this one up, and I would recommend it if you are looking for a fantasy inspired cookbook. So those are all of the books that I picked up as a little birthday present to myself. And I think it is a pretty good blend of romance and fantasy and historical fiction and a little bit of non-fiction too. So I'm really excited to dive into these books, obviously, or I wouldn't have bought them. But if you have read any of the books that I've talked about today, please let me know down in a comment below because I'd love to hear your thoughts. But for now, that is it for me. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will be back soon with a new one. Bye for now.